All right, so we have talked about basic cause and effect relationships. And while there are a lot of things that fall into the category of these very basic cause and effect relationships, there's a lot more that fall into more advanced or complex cause and effect relationships. This is a lot of times where we don't necessarily know the cause or the effect. It might be something where we don't know the effect of something that is happening right now. So, for example, we don't know the long term impacts of COVID-19. That is an effect that we will be unaware of for a long time to come. There are also times that we don't know the cause because we might not see impacts of something until years or decades later. And then we have to work back and try to tie something together. So, one example of this might be with the tobacco industry. People started smoking a long time ago, and even in the 1950s, it was okay to smoke in hospitals. And nowadays, we would think that is completely like unheard of because we know the harmful impacts of tobacco, especially with cigarette smoke. But what happened first was there were a lot of cases of lung disease, especially lung cancers. So we had to work back and see what do all these people who have lung cancer have in common? So working from an effect and seeing what caused this effect, however many years ago. We also see this with a lot of medications where we might not see long-term effects during FDA trials. So later on, we might have recalls of drugs or we might have long-term side effects that we just weren't aware of. And that's why in the US, you might have heard of these drug commercials that have long disclaimers at the end. And a lot of times these are very rare. And the even if it is something very serious, it happens in a very small percent of the population, but it's just something that you should be aware of in making your decision. There are also times when we see that two things happen at the same time. So we might say, why are there increasing risks of autism? And many people will look and say, well, we started having a lot of vaccines at the same time. So, with a lot more vaccines being a cause, we will also say effect is there's a lot more people being diagnosed with autism. However, this is one big thing we have to watch out with cause and effect relationships is that correlation is not causation. So, two things that happen at the same time do not necessarily mean those things are connected. So, in the case of autism, it's that we really broadened our ideas of what autism looks like, and also our population grew, and we were more likely to be able to point out people who had autism. And this just so happened to coincide with times that we were increasing vaccines, and the link between vaccines and autism was disproven a long time ago. It was never accurate. All right. So there's lots of times when we're thinking of what is the potential effect of something that we're doing right now? What could this one thing cause later on? Or we're looking at something that we know the effect and what caused this? Why are we like this? What happened? So a lot of times we're thinking of that question, why? Um, so we can think of this in our lives in lots of different ways. And in the business world, this is definitely going to be a big thing where you might think about um, what is causing what. One way that businesses will sometimes evaluate cause and effect relationships is by looking at a fishbone graph, which looks a little like this, and you can understand why they would call it a fishbone. So you have four or more different categories and lots of different elements that will be placed inside those categories. So for this, we have methods, process, equipment, and people. So these are all potential areas for causes. And down here is going to be an effect. All right, so imagine that you are making a vehicle and the vehicle ends up having some faulty parts. That's not good. And you need to find out why it's faulty so that you don't have to recall all the vehicles or so that you can make sure that in the future they aren't as faulty. So you're going to start looking at each of the categories. So first, you might start with methods and say, how were these things made? What was put together? Right, so we're thinking about how. Then if you go through all the methods and all the methods look good, you might think about who is the problem. Maybe there is someone on the line or a group of people that aren't doing their job correctly, or that there is a problem, that there is a missing job or too many people getting involved and that's causing a problem. Or maybe it's a what is going on. Maybe the equipment itself is faulty. So maybe you're accidentally using screws that are 5/8 of an inch, and you actually need to be using screws that are 3/4 inches. So that little tiny difference is making a huge problem and causing your vehicles to be faulty. Or it could be a process issue. So maybe you're doing things in steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and step 3 actually needs to come after step 1. And the problem will be solved if you move around the process. All right. So there's lots of different ways to think about, figuring out what is the cause and what is the effect that is having. All right. So as we can tell, cause and effects relationships can be much more complicated than simply calling your dog to you or having your cat bug you when you wake up in the morning. All right, so I hope this has helped and you're having some greater understanding of what cause and effect relationships can look like. I look forward to diving into this concept even deeper with you and learning from you as we go on. Happy writing.